If your professional life feels like you're just running a marathon on a treadmill that's stuck on maximum speed, where you're constantly frenetically busy answering emails at midnight, juggling 5 huge projects, and just watching your energy reserves completely bottom out, then you are definitely experiencing the exhaustion of modern burnout. You're putting in, 60, 80 hours a week? But the needle on the work that actually matters,
Yeah.
the legacy building stuff, is barely moving.
And that relentless pace, that constant feeling of being completely overwhelmed, it isn't just some unfortunate side effect of success. It's actually the primary barrier to accomplishing your most meaningful goals.
Right.
We've been conditioned to believe that more activity always equals more output. But what if the inverse is true? What if the real key to achieving those big, high-impact goals isn't grinding harder, but purposefully, fundamentally, slowing down? Yep.
Okay, let's unpack this right away. Because that radical alternative, it starts with this incredible foundational story. Back in 1966, John McPhee, who was this highly respected writer for The New Yorker, he was facing a total creative crisis.
A big one.
Yeah, he was trying to write this massive, complex article on the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, and he had 8 months of incredible research, enough to fill a silo, he said. But he couldn't crack the structure. He was completely creatively paralyzed.
And it wasn't a matter of needing more time or even more research. He was just saturated with data, but couldn't find that organizing principle. He was stuck in, analysis paralysis.
So what did he do? This highly paid, expert journalist who's under this insane deadline pressure.
He made a choice that just completely rejects our modern mindset. He deliberately laid down on a picnic table under an old ash tree in his backyard, and for nearly 2 weeks, he did nothing but stare up into the branches.
Wow.
Just fighting the fear and the mounting panic of that clock ticking.
He intentionally induced idleness. He saw it as the only way to break through. He was basically betting on the idea that structure is found in reflection, not in frantic typing.
And that bet absolutely paid off. The structural solution finally arrived.
And what was it?
The focus needed to be on this fascinating local character, Fred Brown, a 79-year-old he had met out in the Barrens. Brown provided the narrative through line that organized all that chaos. That 2-week pause led directly to a brilliant landmark article of more than 30,000 words.
And if you look at his career in the decades that followed that moment of deliberate inaction, it's not defined by constant hustle at all. It's defined by massive high-quality results. 29 books published, a Pulitzer Prize, 5 decades of just distinctive work. He was undeniably productive, but he certainly wasn't visibly busy every single hour of those 50 years.
And that career trajectory, that idea of accomplishment without burnout, is the driving force behind the book we're diving into today. The title is Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout.
And the author is Cal Newport, who is a computer science professor and a New York Times bestselling author. He's really known for his ability to translate these high-level critiques of technology and culture into actionable principles.
That's right. And this deep dive is essentially a roadmap to escaping what he calls the pseudo-productivity trap. That's the deeply entrenched cultural belief that your professional value is judged solely by the visible, frantic activity you display.
Right, how busy you look.
Exactly, rather than the lasting quality of your results. So over the course of our discussion, we are going to unpack 3 fundamental, actionable principles from this work that can really transform your approach to your job, allowing you to produce that lasting, high-quality work without sacrificing your well-being. This is all about building a professional life that is actually sustainable and meaningful.
Let's start with the diagnosis. Why exactly do we feel this pressure? I mean, why are we stuck in this cycle of pseudo-productivity, where we feel we have to constantly signal that we're busy, even if we're not getting our core work done?
Well, the root of the problem is it's structural to knowledge work itself. If you look back at industrial labor, the factory floor output was easily and immediately measured.
Sure. How many parts did you stamp? How many bolts did you tighten?
Exactly. But for cognitive labor, the work of the mind, the value is abstract. How do you measure a good idea or a strategic plan or a brilliant chapter of a book?
You really can't. So what did the professional sector do in the absence of those clear metrics?
We adopted a poor proxy for it, the visible activity heuristic. If you look busy, if your calendar is jam-packed, if you respond to an email immediately, you must be productive.
Right.
It's an inherited mindset where we use the 40-hour work week, which was originally designed to limit the toil of industrial workers, as a way to prove our contribution. We're paid to think, but we're measured by our presence and our responsiveness.
Wait, so the visible activity heuristic is just a fancy way of saying we mistake noise for music. We're using busyness as a proxy for value just because the actual value is hard to quantify.
Precisely. And for decades, this was, inconvenient, but it was manageable. Then, starting in the mid-1990s, the game just changed completely with the digital revolution. Pseudo-productivity became not just an inconvenience, but a genuine crisis.
And that's the digital tipping point. What happened when the networked computers, the email, and later, instant messaging tools like Slack and Zoom came along?
They amplified that visible activity heuristic to dangerous levels. These tools didn't really make us more productive. In fact, they often fragmented our focus, but they made it incredibly easy to visibly signal busyness with minimal effort.
Okay.
A quick email, a frantic chat message, or a rapid reply is a highly visible, low-effort signal of activity. And this behavior just rapidly snowballed into incessant electronic messaging and the modern epidemic of context switching, which leads directly to what Newport calls the Zoom apocalypse.
And this reorientation of how we spend our time is systemic. We're not talking about, isolated incidents of distraction here. We're talking about an entire cultural shift where the primary job is no longer to do the work, but to prove you are working.
The data on this is, frankly, damning. Analysis based on log data from thousands of knowledge workers, like the stuff conducted by Rescue Time, it shows that people check their inboxes once every 6 minutes on average.
Every 6 minutes.
Every 6 minutes. I mean, think about the cognitive cost of that. That means nearly 10 times an hour you are context switching, interrupting deep focus just to prove your responsiveness. That is the definition of pseudo-productivity.
And the result of that constant context switching is the burnout crisis, which is just a tragedy. I mean, studies by McKinsey and Gallup found these significant increases in knowledge workers feeling burned out often or almost always. And the cruel irony is that these stress measures rose right alongside metrics showing an increase in employee efforts. They're working harder, they're getting more exhausted, but they're not getting the valuable results they're looking for.
And the failure of this whole system is clearest when organizations are struggling. The common managerial response is always to just push harder, demand longer hours, and mandate more visibility.
We saw this so vividly with the anecdote about the CBS turnaround in the 1990s.
Right.
When Les Moonves took over as head of entertainment in 95, the network was struggling, dead last in the ratings. What was his classic pseudo-productivity response?
He demanded that his employees work longer hours, turn up the intensity, put in more effort. It was the classic, if we just grind harder, the problems will solve themselves approach.
But that effort wasn't what saved them.
Not at all. The real turnaround came from the sustained, long-term, and often invisible creative efforts of one person, Anthony Zucker. Zucker, who was 26 at the time, was running a casino tram for $8 an hour, but he was obsessed with an idea. He spent over 3 years nurturing the vision for what would become CSI.
Tell us more about the trajectory of that idea. It wasn't an overnight burst of genius, was it?
Oh, far from it. His journey started with a simple monologue, which developed into a spec script sale. It required this intense immersion with the Las Vegas Police Department, and then it involved years of development, false starts, and refinement. He recounts one moment where he was literally combing a bedroom carpet for clues, and the concept just clicked for him. Oh, this is for sure a show.
Right.
But that clarity took years of slow, obsessive effort.
And the ultimate decision to greenlight CSI was made at the absolute last minute, right? Right before the deadline for CBS to announce its fall slate in 2000. It launched, was an immediate massive hit, and combined with the success of Survivor, it vaulted CBS into first place.
This contrast is just profound. Moonves demanded immediate, visible activity and longer hours, which produced exhaustion. Zucker focused on creating something singular and special, obsessively refining his vision over years.
So there were long stretches during the development of CSI where Zucker's visible activity, his attendance at the office, his presence in meetings, it would have been minimal.
Absolutely minimal. But who cares if he rested for months in 1999 when he ultimately saved the network by 2000? His productivity was only at the scale of years, not hours.
That CBS story just changes the whole timeline for productivity, doesn't it? It suggests that if we reject the frantic hustle, we need a philosophy that embraces long-term, focused effort.
We need the philosophy of slow productivity. And the concept, it draws its heritage from the broader slow movement, which started in Rome back in 1986, founded by an activist named Carlo Petrini. He was reacting to the planned opening of a massive McDonald's near the Spanish Steps.
Ah, the slow food movement. rejecting industrial fast food culture in favor of local, communal, and sustainable practices.
Exactly. And that ethos, it spreads so powerfully, proving that radical resistance to acceleration can lead to better outcomes. It expanded into slow cities, which promote neighborly, human-scale infrastructure, slow medicine, focused on holistic patient care, and even slow cinema, which rewards extended attention with deeper insight.
So all these movements use the same strategy of adopting a slower, more sustainable alternative that's often drawn from time-tested wisdom.
Precisely. And slow productivity is applying that same core idea, sustainability, quality, and human scale to the professional world. It rejects the dogma that professional efforts must be continuous and frantic. It posits that accomplishment without burnout is entirely possible through a more humane rhythm.
It's about building those legacy-building accomplishments, but allowing them to unfold at a pace that's both sustainable and just more meaningful for human cognition.
Right.
So to give you the roadmap for the rest of this deep dive, let's lay out the three pillars that define this philosophy.
The entire system of slow productivity hinges on these three fundamental, actionable principles. First, do fewer things.
To focus effort and escape that administrative overhead,
Second, work at a natural pace.
which is to align our work with human history and our cognitive needs,
And third, obsess over quality.
to gain the leverage needed for freedom and long-term success.
And we are going to tackle these systematically, translating all this history and research into practical tools you can start using immediately.
So the first principle is probably the hardest pill to swallow for the modern worker. Do fewer things. We've been culturally trained to believe that the way to get ahead is to squeeze in more work, to layer on more tasks, to constantly maximize our output. This runs contrary to every incentive we face.
It absolutely does, which is why the story of Jane Austen's writing process is so instructive. It really challenges that foundational myth. The popular version, which was spread by her nephew, suggested that she secretly wrote in these frenzied bursts on tiny pieces of paper, hiding them when visitors arrived.
Right, this romanticized version that implies success just requires fitting more work into an already overstuffed life.
The idea being that the only obstacle between you and your great novel is simply a willingness to hustle harder in secret.
But that's not the real story, is it?
No, the reality, when you actually study her life, is far more practical and way less romantic. Austen only became truly prolific after her life drastically simplified. For years, she was constantly busy with the daily demanding work of running her family's house, their farm, and her father's impromptu boys' school.
And we are talking about genuine high-overhead domestic labor here.
Absolutely. Milking cows, tending poultry, managing the constant demands of half a dozen stampeding boys who were staying in the house. It sounds like an extremely high-overhead, unpredictable environment.
Yeah.
It was. And the great creative outburst, that sustained period of productivity that gave us Pride and Prejudice and Emma, it only began after her family shut down the boys' school and later settled into the modest Chawton cottage in 1809.
So her life got quieter.
Much quieter. Her mother focused entirely on gardening. Jane was excused from almost all daily chores beyond preparing morning breakfast. And crucially, the family adopted a sparse existence, embracing a respite from the demanding social scene.
So the catalyst wasn't finding more hours in the day. It was the reduction of her total cognitive and administrative workload. She moved from a constant state of high-overhead domestic chaos to a sparse schedule that supported a predictable rhythm of work.
Exactly. She did fewer things, and she achieved 4 major novel releases in 5 years. This principle isn't about laziness, it's about efficiency born from singularity of purpose. And that brings us to the actual mechanism that makes modern overload so debilitating: the overhead tax.
Define the overhead tax for us, because this is the concept that really exposes the flaw in that more is better mindset.
Every single commitment you accept, no matter how small a task, a large project, a committee membership, it brings with it an ongoing administrative overhead. This includes the back-and-forth emails needed to coordinate, the check-in meetings required to sync up, the constant status reports,
And the mental space it takes up.
most critically, the occupied mental space required to track that commitment. And as the task list grows, the total administrative tax you pay increases not linearly, but exponentially.
That's the critical point. It's nonlinear.
It is. The issue isn't just the time spent in the meeting, it's the constant mental fragmentation. That half-hour meeting isn't just 30 minutes lost. It's 30 minutes of discussion plus 2 hours of ruined focus afterward, because your brain is still trying to sort out the logistics and context of the other 4 commitments you were tracking.
And this tax, it just rapidly slows down the rate at which you accomplish your core objectives.
We saw this play out so tragically with Jonathan Frostick, the program manager at HSBC, who suffered a heart attack during the pandemic.
Oh, that viral post.
Yes, his post about the experience was just this visceral realization of the overhead tax spiraling out of control. He was ending his workday exhausted at 8 p.m. on a Friday, and often working weekends just to keep up. His core resolution upon surviving was, I'm not spending all day on Zoom anymore.
His life was just consumed by the symptoms of the overhead tax.
Completely. Meetings and chat signals, forcing the real high-value work into the evenings.
So the tipping point is reached when the logistical effort required to maintain all your commitments just devours the time you need for useful output. The advantage of doing fewer things isn't just about increasing raw hours, it's about improving their quality.
Yes, because you reduce that fragmentation tax. Consider the math of it. If writing one crucial report takes 8 hours of core work, but generates 1 hour of overhead tax per day, you finish one report per day if you focus entirely on it.
Okay.
But if you commit to 4 reports simultaneously, the combined overhead tax, all the logistical wrangling, switching contexts, responding to 4 separate sets of inquiries, that might eat up half your day. Now, you've dedicated 4 working days, but you still haven't finished a single report because your work quality is so low.
So doing fewer things actually ends up producing more higher quality results in less total time.
Exactly.
We've established that volume kills quality. So how do we systematically enforce scarcity in a world that constantly pushes volume onto our plates? Let's start with limiting the big mission-level stuff.
For that, we turn to the Andrew Wiles strategy. Wiles focused entirely on one mission: proving Fermat's last theorem, a puzzle that had stumped mathematicians for 350 years. He knew this would require years of singular, deep attention. So, to achieve this, he systematically reduced all competing commitments.
No conferences.
He stopped attending conferences, worked almost exclusively from his attic study at home.
Hold on, though. Wiles was a tenured academic. Most of us are not. If I try to just disappear into my attic, my manager is going to ask, so what have you done this quarter? How do we make that strategy work when visibility is mandatory?
That's a crucial point. Wiles knew he needed to manage the expectations of his peers, who were used to seeing a steady stream of publications from him. So his cunning ploy was to take a massive piece of research he had already completed on elliptic curve theory and break it into smaller papers.
So it was managing the optics.
He would then trickle out his already completed research every 6 months or so. He maintained the appearance of normal, diverse productivity for his colleagues without diverting a single minute of new, deep attention from his secret mission.
The takeaway isn't literally to hide in an attic, then. It's to understand that you need systematic rules and creative strategies to manage expectations and reduce the commitments that compete for your time.
Your big mission requires protection. And sometimes that protection involves creating a strategic buffer of visibility using work you've already completed.
Okay, so once we've limited the big missions, we have to tackle the small tasks, which you rightly call the productivity termites. They just nibble away at the foundation.
Exactly. And small tasks, in sufficient quantity, they destabilize the whole foundation. We can learn containment from Benjamin Franklin. Franklin's early career started with intense grinding. He worked until midnight, defining his virtue of industry as lose no time.
But his career really took off later.
It truly exploded after 1748 when he hired David Hall, an efficient British printer's assistant, to manage his Philadelphia printing shop. He outsourced all the small administrative minutiae.
He happily traded money for time.
He did. And Hall's efficiency freed Franklin from all the administrative minutiae, allowing him to obsess over loftier, more singular projects, specifically the emerging field of electricity theory. Within a few years, this dedicated focus led to the popularization of positive and negative flow, the invention of the battery and the lightning rod, which catapulted him to world fame.
Taming the small details opened up the cognitive space for those big, meaningful breakthroughs. This sounds great for an entrepreneur, but what about in an institutional environment? Moving from historical anecdote to modern organizational strategy, how can a large organization or an individual within one manage the workflow to limit overload?
You look at the power of the pull-based workflow. It's a strategy that proved transformative at the Broad Institute, the joint venture between MIT and Harvard conducting genetic sequencing. Their massive pipeline suffered from chaos because of a push strategy.
What does a push strategy look like in that context?
Well, each stage of the process samples as fast as possible and immediately push them to the next stage, regardless of the next stage's capacity.
So it created huge pileups.
Huge backlogs at the slower, more complicated stages, the sequencing machines or the analysis teams. They were prioritizing speed at the local level, which created systemic chaos and led to an average processing time of 120 days.
Agonizingly long waits. So the solution was the exact opposite, the pull system.
A pull system means each stage only pulls in new work when it's ready for it. At the Broad Institute, they implemented this simply using designated physical trays. If the tray was full, the upstream stage had to wait. It forced discipline.
And the results?
It dramatically reduced backlogs. It doubled the usage rate of their expensive sequencing machines by eliminating bottlenecks, and it cut the average processing time by over 85%.
That's an incredible result from just changing the flow. But if I'm an individual knowledge worker and I don't control the flow of requests from my manager or clients, how do I apply this pull strategy?
You simulate it. And this is a critical strategy for personal implementation. You maintain a small active list for the projects you are currently advancing, ideally limited to, say, 1 to 3 items, and then a larger holding tank for everything else you've committed to.
So the key is you only pull work from the tank when a spot frees up on the active list.
Precisely. This is a way to maintain transparency because everything is tracked in that holding tank, while strictly limiting your real-time cognitive overload, which reduces the overhead tax.
And this requires a rigorous, almost formal intake procedure for accepting new work.
It does. When someone requests something, you use a clear process, requiring them to provide sufficient background, context, or documentation before the task can be formally added to your holding tank. This creates crucial friction.
And sometimes that friction is enough to make the request go away.
Sometimes a boss will shoot off an idea on a whim, but when confronted with the reality of your current workload and the need to formalize the request and place it behind 15 other items, they might just say, you know what, on second thought, let's put a pin in this one for 6 months.
You often find that for the requester, relief that a task is tracked and contained trumps expediency. They just want to know it's handled, not that you immediately started and crashed because you were overloaded.
The simulated pull system is the essential defense against the overhead tax. It is the primary mechanism for implementing our first principle: do fewer things.
Okay, so if rejecting the frantic hustle means prioritizing our core missions, as we saw with Zucker and Wiles, the next logical question is, how fast should we be moving? And that brings us to principle 2, working at a natural pace. When we look at the great scientists and thinkers of the past, their professional lives were radically different from our own relentless pace.
They operated on a scale of years, not days. Consider Copernicus. His revolutionary theories about planetary motion were first sparked when he was a 23-year-old student in 1496. But he didn't write down his definitive theories until 1510.
So that's already 14 years.
14 years. And it took him 3 decades total until 1543 before he finally published his masterwork on the revolutions of the celestial spheres. 30 years.
Similarly, Isaac Newton took over 20 years to develop all the ideas contained in his Principia. We can't imagine a modern executive or scientist sitting on an idea that important for 3 decades.
They understood that quality requires time. Even Marie Curie in 1896, she was on the precipice of isolating a new, fiercely active element, the moment of peak momentum for a scientist. And what did she do?
She took a vacation.
She, her husband Pierre, and their newborn baby shuttered their modest flat in Paris and retreated into the French countryside for an extended vacation, climbing hills and bathing in rivers. The idea that high productivity means constant, uninterrupted toil is a purely modern fiction.
They were just comfortable taking longer on projects and adopting a variable rhythm.
Even Galileo, who was immensely productive, viewed his life as a flourishing existence, not relentless toil. He studied classical literature, he attended the theater regularly, he played the lute. The key insight is that the value of their ideas lives on, while the lazy or variable pace at which they were produced is entirely forgotten.
And this historical rhythm, it seems to align much better with how humans are actually wired to work, far before the age of deadlines and Slack channels.
Oh, absolutely. Anthropological research confirms that for the vast majority of human existence, our work was varied and humane. Richard Lee's famous study of the Juhuansi hunter-gatherers in the Kalahari Desert showed that adults spent, on average, only about 20 hours a week acquiring food.
20 hours acquiring food. So you're telling me the original office hours were basically 4 half days? I feel personally defrauded by the 40-hour week.
And that's not even counting the 20 hours on maintenance tasks. And Mark Dybel's later study of the Agta of the northern Philippines confirmed that this work wasn't continuous. While nearby rice farmers engaged in monotonous, continuous work, the foragers experienced these intense bursts of effort, a long hunting hike or concentrated fishing followed by long respites or long periods just waiting out the rain.
An uneven seasonal rhythm.
Right. And the modern 40-hour work week, that homogeneous continuous intensity, is an industrial borrowing. It was adopted to satisfy pseudo-productivity, not cognitive demands. It stripped away the agricultural seasonality that gave our ancestors built-in quiet times, like the deep winter.
And the homogeneity of modern knowledge work, colonizing our evenings, our weekends, our vacations. It leaves little recourse beyond burnout.
So working at a natural pace means rejecting that constant monotonous intensity and injecting variation, because that uneven pace is arguably the better long-term strategy for brilliance and creative longevity.
Okay, so how do we inject that variable natural rhythm into our modern scheduled lives? Let's start with how we budget time for our most important projects. The Lin-Manuel Miranda strategy.
Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical, In the Heights, it premiered in 2000 as a shop-worn student production. Miranda spent 7 years working intermittently on it, and during that time, he was substitute teaching, he was writing restaurant reviews for the Manhattan Times, and touring internationally with his improv rap crew.
The pseudo-productivity mindset would look at 7 years and all those side gigs and see wasted energy, a great talent, diluted by distraction.
But the slow productivity mindset sees the crucial advantage in that languid pace. That long period, interspersed with other activities, it allowed for frequent cold starts, returning to the material after time away. This injected creativity and allowed Miranda, the college sophomore who conceived the idea, time to mature into the experienced, interesting creative talent required to produce a Broadway-caliber show.
His greatness needed time to marinate.
Exactly.
So for you, the listener, the practical tip is simple but challenging to commit to. Create a 5-year plan for your biggest ambitions, and then double the timeline you initially think you need.
Yes. We are naturally pathologically optimistic about timelines. Doubling the time counteracts that bias and creates a sustainable pace. If you evaluate your success over the scale of years, you can tolerate the necessary busy academic periods or career pauses. Grand achievement is built on the steady accumulation of modest results over time, and this path requires pacing yourself.
And moving from years to seasons, how do we integrate intentional downtime into the calendar year? We can't all ask for 2 months off.
We can embrace seasonality by following the Georgia O'Keeffe strategy. Her early career was a dizzying hustle of teaching and commercial art across multiple states. Her staggering artistic potential was unlocked by escaping to Lake George, New York every summer from 1918 to 1934.
So she developed a routine there.
A pastoral routine. She converted a shanty into a studio and produced over 200 nature-inspired paintings. That seasonal respite, a full 2 to 3 months of focused slowness, was the engine for her creative output.
And this concept isn't limited to the past.
Not at all. We see it in Ian Fleming's contract with Kemsley Newspapers, which granted him 2 months of annual vacation to write at Goldeneye in Jamaica. And modern freelancers and entrepreneurs like Jenny Blake, they achieve this today. Blake intentionally restructured her corporate training business to keep 2 full months clear each year.
And she trades income for that time.
She happily traded roughly 20% less income for the benefit of an annual extended escape, demonstrating that maximizing life quality is a valid professional choice over merely maximizing revenue.
But for those of us in structured corporate environments where a 2-month break is impossible, we can implement small seasonality.
Right. Small seasonality involves varying your intensity at smaller timescales to avoid that constant, anxious high energy. This might mean scheduling no-meeting Mondays to allow for a gradual transition from the weekend into focused work.
Or scheduling a rest project.
Or, more actively, scheduling a rest project, a deliberate, planned break, like blocking an entire afternoon once a month. This isn't wasted time. It's a planned recovery session to compensate for the necessary context switching you did earlier in the month, maintaining balance and preventing the total cognitive tank from running empty.
The company Basecamp has a model for this, right?
Yeah. Yes. Basecamp formalizes the variation. 6 weeks of focused effort and urgency, followed by a 2-week cool-down period where employees can recharge and address small internal issues. They actively resist the temptation to extend the cycles into the cool-down, recognizing that regulated, mandatory breaks ensure the work completed within the focus cycles is higher quality and that the entire structure is sustainable year after year.
Finally, the pace of work isn't just about the clock or the calendar. It's about the environment we place ourselves in. We need to learn how to change our surroundings to change our state of mind.
We need to learn to work poetically, following the Mary Oliver strategy. Oliver found escape and creative inspiration by wandering the woods of her native Ohio and scribbling notes during her extended rambles. The context of the work transformed her cognitive reality.
So the French philosopher Gaston Bachelard argued our surroundings can transform our cognitive reality. Inhabited space transcends geometrical space.
Exactly. So we need to match our space to our work, finding our own version of Oliver's long walks. It's about creating a personal, intentional sanctuary for deep thought.
And famous creators have tailored their surroundings to do
Yeah,
this.
they have. Look at Dan Brown, for instance. He invested his fortune from the Da Vinci Code in a custom home filled with Gothic features, hidden doors, portals, reverse Da Vinci notes, all tailored to support the mysterious, conspiracy-laden genre he writes. The environment reinforces the mindset.
And Francis Ford Coppola does something similar.
He does. He has a long-standing habit of keeping soldering irons, switches, and diodes in his various production offices, not because he's building rockets, but to recenter himself on the primal importance of building things from scratch.
But the goal isn't necessarily luxury or style. Sometimes the right environment is simply strange or inconvenient.
Peter Benchley, the author of Jaws, is the perfect contrast to Dan Brown's Gothic mansion. He needed to write a tight, terrifying thriller, so he abandoned his comfortable home and wrote in a rented space in the back of a furnace repair shop, enduring the constant loud noise, just bang, bang, bang.
And Maya Angelou took it even further.
She did. Renting bland hotel rooms, demanding the art be removed, and working lying on the bed developing calluses on her elbow.
So why the retreat to these objectively worse, noisier, or blander conditions? What is the function of this strange place?
The goal is intentional disconnection from the familiar. The home is filled with familiar cues. When we pass the laundry basket outside our home office, our brain shifts context, creating what neuroscientists call a traffic jam of neural nodes trying to get through to consciousness.
Right.
Strange, non-familiar settings calm the brain's associative memory system. By removing the visual and psychological cues associated with domestic life and administrative overhead, attention can mold itself entirely around a singular pursuit.
And that supports a more natural, slower, and ultimately more focused pace. So for you, the listener, finding your strange place might mean trying a corner of a public library or an obscure bench in a local park, or even just clearing out the guest room and using it strictly for deep work.
It's about engineering your environment for focus.
Okay, if the first two principles are about creating space and time, the third principle, obsess over quality, is about leveraging that space for maximum impact. This is where we move from being merely efficient to being highly valuable. And the fantastic story of Jewel's breakout success in the mid-90s illustrates perfectly how quality acts as leverage.
Jewel was a 19-year-old singer-songwriter who was literally living out of her car, performing these raw, authentic, epic folk sets alone on stage at the Interchange Coffee House in San Diego.
And she was known for her incredible vocal control.
Spectacular vocal control, which she had developed from years of yodeling with her parents' musical act in Alaska. Her genuine talent rapidly generated massive crowds spilling out onto the sidewalk.
And naturally, the record executors showed up, which led to a huge offer from Atlantic Records.
Yes, she was offered a $1 million signing bonus. But crucially, Jewel, who had educated herself on the business by reading books on the music industry, knew that the bonus was essentially a loan that she would have to pay back through her earnings. It was leverage against her.
So what was the bet she made?
Despite being homeless at the time, she turned down the $1 million advance.
Incredible.
Her reasoning was brilliant and focused purely on quality and longevity. A low-cost artist wouldn't be dropped if she wasn't an immediate hit. This would grant her the freedom and time to pursue authentic, raw art. Her motto became, "Hardwood grows slowly."
And she chose her producer carefully.
She chose Neil Young's producer, Ben Keith, specifically for a raw, authentic sound, turning down 20 industry hotshots who would have pushed her into a generic commercial mold.
That kind of decision is just unthinkable in a pseudo-productivity culture that demands immediate financial returns. She made a long-term investment in her own quality.
And the strategy worked, but not instantly. Her first album, Pieces of You, which came out in 1995, initially failed miserably. Radio hated her, but because she didn't cost the label much money, they kept her on the roster.
So she kept touring.
She redoubled her touring efforts, focusing on college campuses, and when she recut the single You Were Meant for Me into a more soulful version, the years of building quality suddenly paid off. Sales exploded, eventually moving over 12 million copies. Jewel leveraged quality not for immediate wealth, but for the most valuable resource of all, the time and freedom to find her genuine voice.
And that idea that quality is the currency of freedom applies directly to knowledge work.
Absolutely. Take Paul Jarvis, the web designer based on Vancouver Island. He chose not to scale his business. Instead, by dedicating himself to becoming exceptionally good at rare and valuable design and consulting skills, he leveraged that quality to maintain a high six-figure salary while working only 25 weeks a year.
He runs a company of one.
Exactly. Spending his freed up time hiking and gardening. By focusing on exceptional output, he gained the leverage required to escape the busyness trap and redefine success entirely on his own terms.
So to achieve that level of quality, we have to start by understanding what quality even looks like. The Ira Glass principle offers a fundamental insight into the creative development process.
Ira Glass, the creator of This American Life, famously observed that creative work is defined by the gap between your good taste and your current ability. When you start out, your taste for excellence exceeds your capability, which leads to frustration.
Right.
And the common prescription is that the path to quality requires a huge volume of work to close that gap. However, Glass also realized that his taste itself was still developing early in his career. So success requires not only the drive to meet your high standards, but also systematic efforts to improve those standards over time.
So how do we actively refine our standards of brilliance without feeling perpetually defeated by our own limitations?
We can become an enthusiastic generalist. It can be profoundly disheartening to study great work in your own field because confronting the gap between a master's output and your own capability is just stressful.
Yeah, that can be paralyzing.
But the pressure is reduced when you study an unrelated field. For instance, Cal Newport studied film theory reading about Quentin Tarantino's use of nonlinear narrative and genre tropes, like in Reservoir Dogs.
And how did studying an action film inform his academic nonfiction?
He realized that working with lower genre tropes like standard self-help conventions, when pursuing higher, more sophisticated ends, can be a powerful creative exercise, just as Tarantino mixed genres to surprise his audience. Studying film, an unrelated field, enlarged his ambitions as an author without the white-knuckle stress of reading a competitor's work.
You can upgrade your standards by seeing excellence outside your domain.
And another powerful strategy for upgrading quality is through community and accountability. You can start your own inklings.
Like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien?
Exactly. They started this informal discussion club at Oxford where they would gather and share their works in progress. Tolkien relied heavily on their feedback to shape the complex mythology of The Lord of the Rings. And the insight here is crucial. When like-minded professionals gather, the collective taste of the group often exceeds any individual's.
It provides an instantaneous upgrade to the standard of quality you're pursuing.
Because you're now performing for a crowd you want to impress and who will offer genuinely helpful, high-level criticism.
And we're not just talking about abstract taste or community feedback. This can extend to the very tools you use, investing in your tools to sharpen focus.
Absolutely. The idea is that expensive or high-quality tools can signal a commitment to your brain. Newport talks about buying an expensive archival quality lab notebook for $50 as a computer science postdoc. The cost motivated him to be more careful, more structured, and more deliberate in his thinking about difficult theorems.
The notebook itself became a cognitive tool.
Yes. He used only 97 of its pages over 2 years, but those pages contained the core results for 7 peer-reviewed publications and foundational thinking for a major grant. The tool itself, because of its quality and perceived value, pushed his craftsmanship to a new, higher level. The cost created pressure to produce something worthy of the paper it was written on.
Obsessing over quality requires intense focus, and sometimes the best way to generate that focus is through internal pressure, what the book calls betting on yourself. This is about setting non-trivial stakes for failure, but attractive rewards for success.
And we can start with the Stephanie Meyer strategy, right after the kids go to bed. Meyer, a stay-at-home parent, squeezed writing her first novel, Twilight, into late-night sessions because it was the only unbroken time she had. She was making a short-term sacrifice of leisure.
And as you noted earlier, this sounds grueling and unsustainable if done permanently.
It is not a sustainable long-term strategy, but for a temporary, intense period, about 6 months. For Meyer, sacrificing something meaningful like sleep or leisure, it creates pressure and focus. Given the sacrifices this goal demanded, she was intensely motivated to not waste time on a half-hearted, low-quality effort.
So the pressure-motivated increased attention, which increased the quality.
Exactly. The resulting manuscript was sharp enough to land her a major book deal. This is a deliberate, temporary sacrifice to maximize the quality of a specific, high-stakes creative project.
And the ultimate bet, of course, is attracting external commitment, whether that's financial or social, because that increases the perceived cost of failure.
For that, we can follow the John Carpenter strategy: attract an investor. Carpenter's low-budget film Assault on Precinct 13 showed talent, but when it came time to make Halloween, he needed serious commitment to elevate the project to greatness. Financier Mustafa Akkad invested $300,000, and Carpenter agreed to take no fees, betting his pay entirely on the success of the film.
That's a massive self-bet. Taking no fees on the front end means failure costs you everything you invested, including your time and your immediate income.
The pressure to satisfy an investor's serious financial commitment pushed Carpenter's craftsmanship to a new level. He and his cinematographer, Dean Cundy, invested nearly half that money in brand new, lightweight Panavision cameras, allowing them to achieve complex, iconic shots that defined the slasher genre.
So his goal changed.
His goal with Assault was to showcase talent. His goal with Halloween was to create a classic movie. Attracting that financial or sweat equity investment, it just amplifies motivation and pushes you toward the level where greatness can be found because the stakes are too high to settle for mediocrity.
It's the ultimate feedback loop, then. Focusing on quality first gives you the leverage to demand time and flexibility, which in turn allows you to focus on even higher quality, which leads to sustainable accomplishment. What stands out when you connect all these pieces is just the radical contrast between the frenzy we accept as normal and the deliberate, focused slowness that actually generates profound accomplishment. Slow productivity seems to be the only path to meaningful legacy-building results that doesn't also guarantee burnout.
To summarize the essential shift, we have to reject the visible activity heuristic, the idea that noise equals music, and commit instead to 3 intentional, self-imposed principles. First, do fewer things.
To escape that debilitating overhead tax, like Jane Austen at Chawton, allowing for that singularity of purpose.
Second, work at a natural pace.
To align with human history, our cognitive needs, and seasonal rhythms, like Marie Curie or Lin-Manuel Miranda.
And third, obsess over quality.
To gain the freedom and leverage you need for long-term sustainability, like Jewel or Paul Jarvis. Remember, your efforts, like those of history's greatest minds, are ultimately judged on the scale of years and legacy, not the number of emails you answered today. Go forth and focus on creating legacy-building accomplishments at a more human speed.
And the final provocative thought here is that most knowledge workers feel vaguely overloaded all the time because they rely on stress as a crude heuristic for moderation. You don't say no to new commitments until you feel sufficiently stressed, which ensures you permanently live at the edge of burnout. Reject that crude heuristic entirely. Build intentional systems that keep your workload sparse and your contribution both meaningful and sustainable.
If this deep dive helped you gain clarity and valuable insights on how to transform your work life, please remember to show your support. Like the episode, subscribe for future deep dives, and leave a comment to share your own slow productivity strategies and successes. We'll be here next time with another stack of sources and a new path to becoming well-informed.